Thank you, Lucy, for the intro, and also to Phil and to James. I think what James has talked about is actually spot on. And it's encouraging, and I have to say it's been encouraging going through this process over the last few months about the consistency of the themes that you see emerging. And what I'm about to talk about, which is sort of an amalgam of about 150 people that we've spoken to across the Committee for Sydney over a series of workshops over the last few months, is absolutely consistent with what James has told you about what Sydney-siders are asking for. And that's encouraging. So a helpful exercise. So the title of this is actually quite deliberate, and that is A City of Choice, A City of Ambition, Sydney 2054. And it's all about creating a vision for a livable city in the future and to make sure that we maintain that livability going forward, a robust city. So Sydney today, it's a productive, vibrant, economic powerhouse of a city. It's dominated by a beautiful harbour, geography that's encouraged a very substantial, centralised CBD, and a very spreading dormitory suburbia. But this very strength is also perhaps its biggest challenge. And the question to ask ourselves is that can Sydney continue to grow in that fashion as its population dramatically increases? Sydney's certainly growing, but right up to now, it's been growing in a perhaps a less than coordinated fashion. And we need to think about how we can come up with a more coordinated vision that embraces that idea of a growing population, a future economy, the infrastructure that we need, and even the basic livability of the city. And the current Metro Plan is more of a description of the status quo, more a description of how we've been growing, rather than a forward-looking document, a description of how we should grow into the future. And hopefully that's going to change, but it's like every business, you need a long-term vision and then a short-term plan which takes you towards it. Sydney's been lacking that long-term vision, something that Melbourne has had for a little while. So the question is, for the past 40 years, we've been creating there's a Sydney 2031 plan, there's a current draft. For the last 40 years, we've been creating the infamous Sydney sprawl. It's about a lack of infrastructure around new housing, about congested radial transport networks, about very long commutes to work, about social inequity that has made Sydney one of the least affordable cities in the world. And as a country, and as a result of that, people are leaving Sydney and moving to other parts of the country every year. So there's a drain of our best people going to other states. Sydney is in fact losing many of the key ingredients of a livable city, ingredients that Melbourne has in fact got right. And as a result, Sydney is losing its status as Australia's premier global city, and the prediction is by 2054, if we keep doing what we're doing, Melbourne will be not only the largest city in Australia, but also its premier global city. So the Committee for Sydney undertook a series of workshops looking at Sydney through a number of different lenses, demographics, urban planning, transport, economics and so on. And we spoke, as I said, to about 150 or so people who came to those workshops to tap into their thinking about the long-term vision for Sydney and using an evidence-based approach that goes beyond the political cycles to determine what we need to do today to set inside a vision for Sydney for tomorrow that we and our children both need and deserve. And today I've just got some initial findings, and as Tim was saying, we're going to look at it through a number of different lenses, and I want your ideas about how we can create not only have a clear vision for what Sydney is, but some key actions that might fit underneath those visions in a way that makes us a city of choice and a livable city. Before we go into that, I just want to do a bit of background. There's some recent trends that are worth observing, and there's been a trend that we've been observing now for quite a while in Sydney, and that is the trend to higher density cities. People are flocking to cities and to centres because of the greater socio-economic opportunities that arise from that, concentration of services, access to infrastructure, agglomeration of jobs and knowledge networks, and for lifestyle reasons. It's called the Great Inversion. It's from the flight to suburbs we saw a generation ago to a flight back to city centres, looking for, in fact, a better, more attractive lifestyle. People are time poor, they don't want to waste it travelling. Proximity to opportunities is now the new focus. They want to be close to everything. Attracting graduates and the downsizing retirees are in fact an interesting market. They're both looking for higher density centres for the lifestyle that they bring. And the Great Australian Dream is now increasingly changing from a 4-bedroom McMansion on the fringe of the CBD with a grass to mow and 90-minute commute to work to being more of a dream of a higher density living closer to where amenities are. And this phenomenon is very well described by the quote that's up there on the screen. Let me read it for you. It says, "What used to be the white flight to the suburbs is now turning into a bright flight to cities that have become magnets for aspiring adults who see access to knowledge-based jobs, public transportation, and a new city ambience as an attraction." And the demographic shifts are, in fact, supporting that exact same outcome. Both ends of the demographic spectrum are supporting the flight to centres. Baby boomers are retiring and they're downsizing. The highest growth market today is, in fact, the single-person household. That's whether they be old or young. Old because the partner has passed away and they're now sitting in a big house and on the edge of the city. They think, well, it would make more sense for me to live in a one-bedroom apartment close to where all my stuff is. And the young for a different set of reasons, but the same sort of outcomes. Families with 3 children looking for freestanding suburban homes are, in fact, now the slowest growing demographic in the market. In fact, only 40% of Sydney-siders are looking for detached houses, and yet Sydney today is delivering about 60% of the housing stock is detached housing. So there's a fundamental shift happening. Young people are critical, the 25 to 34-year-olds, to the success of the city. Education is increasingly an important factor in economic success in the future, as it is today. And you can see some interesting signals of this. The sustained out-migration of young, talented workers to other cities, to other states, is a signal of a problem. 25 to 34-year-olds are the most mobile, and they determine which places are going to grow. They determine which cities are going to be economically successful, and cities need to compete for them. Therefore, we need to make sure we have the housing stock that satisfies those people at an affordable price point, and place absolutely matters. Young people are attracted to places that are vibrant and have close-in neighbourhoods. So they're the trends we're seeing today, both the demographic trend and the flight to density trend. And so the question to ask is, so what does that look like as we move forward? What happens as we go fast forward to 2054? Well, in 2054, we certainly need to plan for a bigger city. Growth predictions now have recently increased to say that the population, the median growth scenario population will be around 8 million for Sydney by 2054, 3.5 million more people than today. That means, of course, a lot more houses, a lot more jobs, and notably, more transport congestion unless we plan differently. Step one, we need to understand the demographics of what Sydney will look like in 2054. Who are, in fact, we designing it for? Let me tell you who we're not designing it for. Baby boomers. They'll all be dead. And, or they'll be settled in their late 90s that their opinions probably don't matter quite so much. But we are, in fact, looking for a city that young professionals will be interested in, that the Generation Z, and I'll talk more about those in a minute, who will be the decision makers of the day, will find attractive. But what's important is this: there will be a wide variety of people looking for different housing options. And Sydney as a whole is not delivering as many different housing options as we currently even need, and certainly not the ones we need in 2054. So diversity is a really important thing. More and different housing options from the highest density through to the lowest density and everything in between. There'll also be a greater Asian influence, and there will be communities looking to adapt to a more social lifestyle with higher densities around key life amenities. So that's a city of choice, and that's hence the topic for today. And the way that we want to do is to make an option for people to live wherever they would like to, in any form that they would like to live, and not simply say that if I want to live in density, I must live in the CBD of Sydney, and if I want to live in low density, I must live in Penrith, but in fact provide those options right across the geography of Sydney. So let me come back to Generation Z. Generation Z, if you don't know, are the people who are currently born in about 2000. They're currently about 15 years old, or under 15s. But by 2054, they will be the CEOs of every major organisation. They'll be the politicians running the country. They'll be the people and decision makers who are making every major decision about housing, about transport, about jobs, about everything. They have a very different set of aspirations. They've grown up with a very wide cultural diversity. They're well educated, they're global thinking, they're socially aware, they're very interested in sustainability, They have absolutely pervasive digital connectivity and a strong aptitude for change. And most of all, they're into instant gratification. Their mantra is collaborate, connect, cooperate, and they're determined to make a difference. They will have, during their career, 17 different jobs, 5 different careers, and 15 homes in their lifetime. They're much more mobile than their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents. They're very highly educated. 1 in 2 will be having university degrees compared to Generation Y, which is 1 in 3, and Generation X, which is 1 in 4. So the question to ask is, what kind of city would that generation be looking for? Would they accept long DA planning, feasibility studies and cycles where you have to submit volumes of paper and wait for many months before you get the answer? No. They want it online, they want it flexible, they want it now. Would they prefer many different individuals to have a different view? No, they want collaborative group approaches to things. They want a more social city. Gen Zs are entrepreneurs, they multitask, they're very hyper-aware about culture and connectivity, but they're also realists who work for success. So adding all that up, what does that mean for Sydney in 2054? It means we need to plan for a different city. There is no point in making Sydney 2054 the city for the baby boomers. It's a city of different needs. So we've come up with this idea of calling it a lifestyle city, but what does that mean? All of these trends are, whether they're talking about the current urbanisation trend to density, the current demographic trends, or even looking at the future population of 2054 and what their needs might be, they all in fact point to the same conclusion, and that is we need to plan for a city we're calling a lifestyle city, but what does it mean? It's a compact city where lifestyle matters, where jobs are close to home, where everything I want is both nearby and able to be connected to quickly. That services and infrastructure are well coordinated, that I'm well connected digitally and physically to what I want, the things I want to have access to, that I have enormously good access to education and jobs that are a part of the smart economy where I can live sustainably. And so it's summed up by a really lovely statement that I think was first said by Siobhan Tuhill. I don't know if Siobhan's here today, but she said this: what that means is smaller homes, greater shared spaces, and bigger lifestyles. And I think that's the Sydney of 2054 that we need to create. So we've looked at Sydney 2054 through 6 different lenses, and I want to tell you a bit about those, but they're the key ingredients that make up a lifestyle city, and here they are. The main vision of a lifestyle city is a great place to live that reflects the aspirations of 2054 in terms of placemaking, which is complete neighbourhoods, not dormitory suburbs, about accessible culture and entertainment, about shopping, schools and jobs close to home. And to get that right, there are 6 parameters that we think that have emerged that are important. So let me start with that central vision of the lifestyle city and just talk about, well, what are the things we need to do, therefore, to make this a great place to work? And the scribble on the side is my hand-drawn one, which I did last night. I hope you enjoy. I'm sure we'll do a better one for the report. But the idea of this big vision is this. So it's around this idea of smaller homes, greater shared spaces, bigger lifestyles. The conventional wisdom used to be that creating a strong economy came first, and that increased population and higher quality of life would somehow follow. The converse now, in fact, seems to be far more likely. Creating a high quality of life is the first step to attracting the new residents and the jobs that would follow. And to achieve that, we need to be a polycentric city with at least 2 major CBDs and more as time progresses going forward, Sydney and Parramatta being the first cabs off the rank. And that's simply to cater for our size and our geography and to make this a livable city. The second thing is that it needs to be an interconnected city with 30-minute neighbourhoods. And what we mean by that is to where all life's economic, cultural and lifestyle choices are all accessible within 30 minutes of home. I don't have to travel 90 minutes to find a shop, or 90 minutes to find a job, or 90 minutes to find some entertainment, but rather all those things are closer to where I choose to live, work and play. And that's done not only by getting those transport connections right, but also by, in fact, relocating where some of those things are currently at. And the third aspect of it is with great walkable complete urban centres. That means dense, mixed-use neighbourhoods with culture, recreation and retail amenities that will attract the highly articulated, innovative, educated, entrepreneurial individuals and therefore benefit livability and jobs. And also containing those highly activated, walkable, public spaces that are great for social interaction, where placemaking is the new urban planning tool to create jobs in the new economy and not dormitory suburbs. That's the vision that we're aiming for. So let's start by looking at the first lens of a thriving and prosperous global city. That's the right jobs in the right places, successful businesses for a globally competitive Sydney. So Sydney needs to be an innovative, creative city that has an economic plan. No more, I suppose, jobs in the centre and a 90-minute commute to where you have to work. No more dormitory suburbs, no more radial rail lines, no more all the culture being in the middle and you have to travel an hour to get to it. No more one airport in the east, so tough luck if it takes you longer to get to the airport than it does to get to Melbourne. That's okay. No more radial transport corridors of all sorts, but in fact a radical new plan about equity of access. So that requires a new city structure that drives the job creation and productivity, the transport infrastructure and investment right across Greater Sydney region and integrates that with land use planning in a way that we have not got right before. That means more jobs at the right places and at the right types, distributed to maximise productivity. That's built around, yes, the job agglomeration that you need to make those businesses work, but with access to a smart workforce. It means changes to planning and zoning laws to make that possible. Zoning for mixed use, higher density, economic benefit. And that's something that hasn't been consistently gotten right across Sydney. It also means a polycentric city, as I mentioned, with 2 CBDs initially at Sydney and Parramatta supporting major job and residential centres. And of course, Barangaroo, central to Everleigh, the Sydney light rail network, all very important. But let's also do the Parramatta Square, which is half the size of Barangaroo. Let's do the Ride-on-Me Technology Precinct. Let's do the North Parramatta Residential Zone. And let's make sure that we put out there the same cultural, entertainment, job, economic opportunities as we put in here. To make Parramatta a CBD for 2 million people and not just a CBD for 100,000. It means a new job geography that encourages competitive, smart employment opportunities in Western Sydney and urban infill areas where people can live and changing that traditional pattern of economic activity we've had. Half the new jobs should be in Western Sydney and all the new jobs within 30 minutes commute to work. And certainly we need to build that second airport to create the jobs and opportunities that build on the growth potential of both Mascot and Badgerys Creek and all the associated infrastructure that goes with them. An investment-driven urban renewal program where we, yes, of course, extend the global arc out to Parramatta and on towards Liverpool and Badgerys Creek, but at the same time have an investment pipeline of transit-oriented development and urban renewal that makes good sense. Picks up our urban activation precincts, picks up light rail corridors, picks up the rail links, picks up the major initiatives that you need to create this great city and puts urban renewal around them. So just to illustrate the point about the new geography, this is an interesting statistic. In Sydney, you can access 34% of the jobs within a 30-minute radius of the CBD. In Melbourne, you can access 67% of the jobs. So we've got a work to do to make jobs closer to home and not so far away from where people live. So now let's move to the question of from jobs to houses. We need to create a compact and livable city. That's with the diversity of housing types that the city needs, and so you can live where you choose to live in the kind of accommodation you choose to live in. And the point here about this compact livable city is that no more urban sprawl, no more restrictive zoning to stop density from occurring, no more antique planning system that takes 6 months, 9 months, 12 months to get an approval. No more uncoordinated, inconsistent decisions across Sydney, but a more coordinated vision for what we want. To do that, we need to be to be a livable city, we'll need more affordable, more diverse housing options for all the Sydney-siders, particularly within walking distance to services and transport. We need more social and affordable housing options for key workers in all areas. We shouldn't require our key workers to have to travel 90 minutes when they live at Campbelltown and work or provide their key services here or in Parramatta or in Penrith. We need to have well-designed, walkable neighbourhoods with strong communities. We need to encourage the social interaction, the economic viability of infrastructure, the sustainable demand for transport and shopping and investment, the access to green open spaces and cultural facilities. We need to encourage all those things by having the density that supports them. And if we don't get that density right, those things will not happen. The 30-minute commute to work is just a given. Coordinated approach to delivery of education and health and recreation and cultural facilities is a key, and more great public places where people live and things for them to do there, so they don't need to travel halfway across Sydney for their leisure activities. A changed planning system that will allow a greater diversity of allowable housing choices. We can't just aspire to have more choices, we need to change the planning system to make sure that they in fact can be delivered. Right at the moment, many LEPs in local government areas actually stop higher density housing quite deliberately because they have this NIMBYism, as Lucy was talking about before, that says, well, look, I don't want it here. Whether that might actually be a really good thing for the city, a good thing for the suburb, a good thing for the community is not taken into account. We need more mixed-use neighbourhoods to encourage jobs close to home. We need more infill development to create a compact city, density done well, which is a mantra that the Committee for Sydney has been pushing for quite some time, and rightly so. A better, faster online planning system and that delivers really good outcomes for the city and for people. A consistent approach across all of Sydney with fewer local councils and a long-term view, so that we don't just simply have this short-termism always permeating in what can be done between now and the next election. And we need to consider establishing a permanent metropolitan urban boundary to protect the rural zones and develop a more compact, sustainable city. It's probably not well known, but Melbourne has one. We don't. So there are some number of interesting choices there when it comes to housing. So speaking of local government, which is an area that I've had some involvement in, as Lucy mentioned, that brings me to the governance area. And I think some really key messages are emerging out of all of this. We need better governance, and we need the greater coordination that would come from the Greater Sydney Commission, which is a recent announcement of the state government. And I know that one that Tim has had a lot of involvement in through his experience in London. This is a good idea. It would give a single long-term vision for Sydney. It would better align all the growth and livability objectives and infrastructure we need to deliver that vision. It would involve greater community engagement, a mechanism to capture value for essential infrastructure in some way, and a monitoring role to make sure we're actually progressing towards that, achieving those outcomes. And that's regardless of whatever happens to local government reform. You need the Greater Sydney Commission. I think that's a good outcome. But we probably also need local government reform as a separate issue to get some consistency across the planning of Sydney, to take a wider view on what is for the greater good rather than what might be good for this street or this house or this block. And also to make sure that we have not only appropriately sized but appropriately resourced local government. So you can't talk about Sydney without talking about transport. So a connected and efficient polycentric city is all about transport and access and making sure that those long commutes are no longer the norm. And to do that, you need a city of cities with a very clear structure plan. Yes, a small handful of major CBDs, starting with Sydney and Parramatta, but over time developing out to Liverpool and to Penrith and to other key locations that are well connected to each other and also well connected to their local neighbourhoods, their local populations. And we should aspire to have the absolutely very best transport network for this new Sydney, supported by a long-term pipeline of infrastructure projects where we've transformed the existing, particularly the existing rail system, but you could probably make the same statement for other forms of transport, into a city-shaping, integrated, metro-style network with not only east-west, but also north-south connectivity, so that significantly greater numbers of people can get to where they want to go without having to go through the CBD of Sydney on their way. It would be good to have, like a metro has, and like light rail often has, trains coming every 5 minutes without a timetable. That would be a fabulous way to get around Sydney, the way you get around London, the way you get around Paris, the way you get around New York. There should also be high-speed links between the major CBD centres. It is absolutely possible to have a 10 to 15 minute link between Sydney and Parramatta, and others in this room would be better than I to talk about how that can be achieved. But that kind of aspiration is something we should definitely aim towards. Light rail is also an important catalyst for local development and to provide accessibility from neighbourhoods to their local CBDs, and both the CBD and the Western Sydney light rail networks and extensions of those and additions to those and even whole new ones of those out in further parts of Western Sydney should absolutely occur between now and 2054. Less reliance on the car is important. Sustainable, as was in the survey results, sustainable walking and cycling routes are really important to that. And finally, not to forget freight and logistics. To allow the growth of Sydney economically, we need to get that right, but we need to get it right in a way that doesn't impact the access and connectivity of our urban population. So that brings me to people. And we should absolutely aspire to be a smart and talented city that embraces the technology of the future, the education opportunities, the smart jobs. A city that uses technology and lifestyle to attract talent as a global centre for innovation. It's the smart talent that brings the jobs and the economic benefits in the future. That means we need to have a high-speed digital connectivity. We need to have intelligent buildings, intelligent jobs. We need to have livable communities that are focused on the needs of young professionals who come and work in those smart professions. A city that's compact enough and connected enough so that job opportunities within reach of people right across the city. It's interesting to note the inverse relationship between sprawl and mobility obviously reinforces the need for smart growth urban strategies which try to promote compact centres and access to public transit. We need to be a city of educational accessibility. The importance of education to economic success in the future is really strong. We need to end the divide and increase the dividend. Again, a committee for city phrase which I think fits really well with what comes out of this. Where this is a great place to live, where people come for the jobs, but they stay for the lifestyle and the opportunities that Sydney delivers them as well. And just to understand the divide between East and West a little bit more carefully, this actually is a vulnerable communities map. You can see the red ones being high exposure to mortgage and fuel cost increases and the yellow being low exposure. But unfortunately on pretty well every factor you look at, whether it be lower education levels, poorer health, worse job access, greater car usage, higher mortgage exposure, lower social mobility, and everything else we looked at, West has it a lot worse than East. Why should that be the case? We should need to be a much more equitable city and we need to take steps to change that. Finally, a sustainable and greener city that recognises the demand of energy and water and waste and the need for green space is a really important thing. To be a resilient, sustainable city that can grow to 8 million and beyond without being constrained by resources or services or infrastructure, where the environment plays an important part that's not forgotten, particularly with the Generation Z's focus on sustainability. There needs to be more public transport, more dwellings within walking distance of each other, more options for lower rates of car usage, expanded parks and open spaces and green corridors, for leisure, for health, for the environment. Sustainable energy and water use that can be done through greater efficiency, through better design, through price signals, through competition, through technology. We had a whole workshop on how these things can be done, and there are absolutely techniques to achieve that. We also need to look for innovative waste solutions that gets economic value out of the waste and not just throws it away. It's not just recycling. There's black water treatment. There's 100% reuse of products through the use of technology, which we need to explore. And lastly, we need more green, energy-efficient buildings, both new and retrofitting old. That only is a saving in terms of operating costs. It's good for the environment. And as it turns out, 5-star green is becoming now and will become in the future just the new norm. Nobody will build anything less than that because it won't be saleable. So if we get these 6 parameters right, and I'll wrap up here, Sydney will be a livable city, a lifestyle city, a city of choice in 2054 and beyond. And now is the time where we can transform Sydney's thinking and Sydney's planning to make a city for the future. And what's encouraging is out of all the workshops and all the survey results and all the trends that you look at, these same set of parameters emerge over and over again. And so I think there's a really robust vision in here for all of us. Thank you.